Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is May the 11th, 2018. Strong hand. You needed a strong hand this week. Well, long-term thinking. If you have long-term thinking, you're not impulsive, then you didn't need a strong hand because you think 2020 halving. All right. What a wild week. And we have some awesome guests here today. Oh my God, I am pumped. International people taking other people's places at the last minute. Giacomo Zucco, his voice went out. So BTC Benny came straight out of Calgary, riding on a horse, Calgary Stampede, to take his place. Oh my God. Lorien Gamaroff, he was scheduled to come on. And of course he's on. He's coming straight out of Johannesburg. He's got this fashionable jacket on. This is getting a little cool down there. And yes, Americans, it can get cool in Africa. You should visit there one day. I have a blast when I'm there. And then finally, oh my God, the legend has entered the room at long last. Oh yeah, I was hanging out with him in Denver. We were chilling out. Oh man, we were going around the town talking about all sorts of nonsense. It is Trace Mayer. He is here. Oh my God, look, I'm usually such a calm person, but now I'm not calm because Trace is here. I mean, all of you are familiar with this show. I'm very calm all the time, very calm. So he's got me very excited. So Trace, we're going to start off with you because I'm so excited that you're here and you've turned me into this very excited person. There has been, okay, in South Korea, all of a sudden, some exchange got busted supposedly by the government, or they want to investigate it. And lo and behold, all the prices of cryptocurrency start going down. Very reactionary type of people out there. This is what triggered this week's roller coaster, downward at least. When we were talking in Denver, in all seriousness, we were talking about personal responsibility and how people have to learn the hard way sometimes. What is your take on this week and everyone having to learn the hard way, I guess?
Well, we got a lot of new people that came in the fourth quarter, and so they haven't been on the roller coaster very long, have they? And so, when we're looking at this, I don't even know that we can pin any particular price movements on any particular events that are going on. And the reason for that is that we've now got over 100 exchanges that are doing significant amounts of volume. And so why would we think that we've got a lot of, why would we think that one single exchange in South Korea is going to move the global Bitcoin price? I mean, we're talking about a market now that's doing $30 billion of daily volume. We did 8 billion just in the last 24 hours on Bitcoin. Like, one little tiny exchange in South Korea is not that big of a deal. And so I don't know that we can pin it to one particular event that causes any of these things anymore, because, I mean, this is a global currency. This is a global phenomenon. There are tens of millions of people involved in this stuff. In fact, the vast majority of Bitcoin users probably don't even know that anything happened with this South Korean exchange. So I just don't know that it's just such a larger market now.
I would say that you're probably right that most of the Bitcoin people out there do not know about what happened in the South Korean exchange. But the people in the know, the people who like to start these panics, they know about it. And the exchange is pretty big out there. And I think it's more than a coincidence that the price did start to trickle. All the cryptocurrency started going down when this story broke. I don't think people should react this way. I think people should ignore it. To me, it is nothing. It's one exchange. It's a global thing. But because it's a global thing, and that leads to a little bit of confusion on some people's parts, it can be blown out of proportion. And made to scare people out of their Bitcoin. I think it's used, stories like this that sound kind of exotic and large, that have the term, some Asian country's name in it, have an exchange in it, name in it, have a government action involved in the story. If you combine a story with those three topics, it can scare people, especially the newbies who are into flipping. I think there's a huge reactionary element in this community, and you're absolutely right. They haven't been around for a while, and they're not used to these type of things. I mean, we've seen this happen so many times now, and I don't know. I think there are people out there, smart people out there, who just use it as a way to get Bitcoin, cheaper Bitcoin. So, I mean, good. I'm not going to say good for them, but.
Well, I'm not saying that it doesn't have an effect at all. In fact, what we probably see from it is we see a lot of the momentum trading, because I think a lot of the spot price of Bitcoin is determined by algorithms that are all following the leader. So they're running it up or they're running it down. They're playing the momentum. And this is really where, if you're coming into Bitcoin and you're new, this is where the Mayer multiple, not that I coined it, it was Preston, but it's such a fantastic tool for a time or an environment like this, because the current Mayer multiple is 0.84, which means that, so that's the current price divided by the 200-day moving average. And then we look at that statistically and historically, and 84% of the time, that Mayer multiple has been higher than 0.84. So if you want a time to buy, look at the Mayer multiple. It filters out all this daily noise because it's using the 200-day moving average, and it gives you a buy signal that is 84% of the time that multiple is higher. So the probability that you're going to be able to transfer some wealth to yourself that way, it just stacks the numbers in your favor, because otherwise you're dealing with massive momentum trading, and you're dealing with large OTC volumes. And I think we have a lot of accumulation happening by institutions in the OTC market. And so, they also have a reason to run the spot price and then, broker these large OTC deals and accumulate a larger Bitcoin position. And that's how they shake the tree. So, is it the South Korean exchange having a fundamental effect on Bitcoin? Not at all. Is it used as a catalyst in very short-term ways for momentum traders and then the algorithms to pile on? Perhaps. Can you filter all of that out in terms of your own decisions? Yeah, really easily with something like the Mayer multiple. So, you're going to spend more time and attention and waste a lot more of your energy following all of this news and trying to parse it and read the tea leaves than if you just filter it all out and use something like the 200-day moving average and the Mayer multiple, at least in my opinion. I mean, that's how I play it. I got lots of other things to do besides run around chasing my tail and do some frenzy.
I've got to say that the Mayer multiple has probably become one of my favorite indicators. It's the perfect hodling indicator, because when you look at it and you see, if the price drops like it did the last little bit, and you look at the Mayer multiple and realize that, well, you're in this tiny percentage of time where it's been below a certain point, it keeps your head cool, and it keeps you in the game, and it prevents you from panicking. So anybody not familiar with it, I would do some reading, because there's some great stuff out there, and it just calms you down and keeps you long-term thinking.
Well, and one, thanks for kind of the assessment of that, but two, if you're buying Bitcoin, you want the price to be as cheap as possible. You want to buy it when it's cheap, not when it's expensive. And that's really what I like to use the Mayer multiple to do, is find out, when is it cheap on a relative basis and when is it expensive on a relative basis, and then buy or sell appropriately based on that indicator. And it filters out all that daily noise. It helps you not get yanked around by Mr. Market. You're able to filter all that out, look at the long-term trend, and it just helps really give clarity to that decision-making process.
Yeah, it's perfect for newbies, especially because they're the ones that are the most susceptible to that daily noise.
I was going to say, this is basically saying, ignore those emotions, people. He's got a pure number here, okay? And Trace really made my point out. A really great point. Quickly explain what the Mayer multiple is for people who might not know it, though.
Yeah, so at least the way I like to approach allocating capital, first I do the fundamental analysis. You know, in Bitcoin's case, that's the 7 network effects of why you would hire Bitcoin. Then, you know, I do a technical analysis. In my case, I like being the hodler of last resort, right? Like the hodler. And that means somebody that is never going to sell the Bitcoin ever, period. And that's really what gives the strength to the Bitcoin price. Well, if you're going to become the hodler of last resort, it means that you want to get the most amount of Bitcoins or the most amount of Satoshis as possible. Well, how can you do that? I like to filter out the long-term noise, the short-term noise by using the long-term trend. So in the Mayer multiples case, you take the 200-day moving average, you take the current price, divided by that 200-day moving average, and it gives you the multiple. And you can look at that multiple every day. And when that and then you can also plot that multiple over time. And Preston, who came up and coined the phrase Mayer multiple, he's wrote a whole long post about it, mayermultiple.com. And what we're able to see is that sometimes that ratio will get really crazy. Like it might get up to like 8x or like in December, it got up to 3.7x. And that means that it's very expensive. Bitcoins are very expensive relative to other assets, particularly the dollar, because you can do this Mayer multiple in any price ratio. You could do it Bitcoin yen, you could do it Bitcoin gold, you could do Bitcoin Microsoft shares. You know, that would be a fun one. I would love to see Bill Gates short Bitcoin in a really big way with his Microsoft shares. You know, since he thinks it's a kind of not a good asset to own or whatever, or Warren Buffett for that matter. But they won't put their money where their mouth is. They won't short it because they're chickens and they know they're wrong. But anyways, you know, when you look at that price ratio and you do use that Mayer multiple, then you can start acquiring Bitcoin when it's cheap. And that's really what you want to do. You want to buy Bitcoin when it's cheap and you want to sell Bitcoin when it's expensive. And, you know, if you're a hodler, it doesn't mean that you would never sell Bitcoin. You might have lots of reasons to sell Bitcoin. For example, you might want to pay taxes on fork gains, you know, so you might have fork gain. You might have something like Bitcoin Cash. You might have sold it for dollars or for other Bitcoin, and then you might have a taxable gain on that. And so you might need to sell Bitcoins in order to pay that taxable gain. And if you're using something like the Mayer multiple to time those sales, then you can end up hodling more Bitcoins. Or you might just want to have lifestyle improvements, you know, the famous Lambo or whatever. Personally, I don't see much point in discretionary spending like that isn't very useful or helpful for other people. But some people do, and like, go for it, you know, get an orange one like Roger Ver, like go for it. Because when you sell those Bitcoins, well, there's going to be another hodler that's going to step in and buy them. And so, you know, I really like the idea of, you know, spreading the Bitcoins around and getting more hodlers of last resort, because the more widely we can spread these Bitcoins and have hodlers of last resort, the stronger that Bitcoin price is going to be and the deeper that liquidity is going to be. And that's all about the first network effect of Bitcoin. And we got 7 of them taking root at the same time. But yeah, that first one, and the way to really be the most efficient or hodler of last resort and acquire the most Bitcoins, in my opinion, it's using something like the Mayer multiple to time those purchases.
Strong hand, people. Don't buy that Lamborghini. I say no discretionary spending. Pay your taxes with your fiat. Yeah, I'm hardcore though, but I'm glad. Hey, man, this is going wild. Pound that like button, everyone. Vention MGTOW, thank you for the $10 in the super chat. Okay, we haven't heard from Lorien Gamaroff yet, and we must hear from him right now. Lorien, a lot has been said. What's going on? Talking about emotion versus pure numbers. What's your take on everything?
Yeah, well, I mean, the last month has been really great for crypto in general. I think it's been on the up, and people have probably been thinking that any minute now there's going to be another crash, so they're looking for any sort of story that will come along, and this story obviously is a reason to start offloading. Everyone feels that the market is spooked, but also, I think that speaks to a much bigger thing here when it comes to BTC, especially. It's not that we have a market of what we can call users. It's people who are investing in BTC and especially if they are speculating on it. And I think that's largely what we have is a speculative market. It's as soon as a story comes out, there's going to be a movement and there's going to be something like this. So I think that when Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and these other currencies become usable, much more useful in terms of merchants accepting them and users actually spending them, and it's not just a thing that people are investing in and buying and selling and trading. I think when it becomes something that actually becomes functional, then we're going to probably see less of these crazy ups and downs, because then people will realize, look, an exchange getting hacked is not going to destroy the utility of these things. They're still going to be useful as currency, maybe Bitcoin useful as a decentralized store of value. So it's just this early stage, all of these stories, and there will be more exchanges, more everything, more government spanning or whatever it is, and people are going to be spooked and they're going to be dumping. But obviously, if you're in this for the long term, it shouldn't really bother you. If you're not, then you're going to be riding the roller coaster.
Very good points right there. And I want to say, Benny, do you have any thoughts on what Lorien just said in terms of, things calming down once these cryptocurrency have more of a use case? And by the way, are being used. And Lorien's going to talk about some uses of cryptocurrency a little bit later on too, by the way. Benny.
Yeah. So as we see these big sell-offs, you got to realize that for every pair of hands that's weakened enough to sell, there's another pair of hands that has strengthened enough to buy and hodl what was just sold. So, you're transitioning from people who maybe they got in early, they've made some money. Well, this next group of people is going to grab and hodl their Bitcoin that they've just bought. It's always going to cycle through like that, but in the long term, it's just being distributed, right? Like you have, I'll be honest, when you sent me what we were going to be talking about, I hadn't even heard of what happened with this exchange until the moment it was just before the show. So I quickly looked, and it's funny because I saw the story, and had I been looking online at news, I probably would have scrolled past it because it's more of the same. You see this all the time now. It's a symptom of it's still a young market, and we're trying to build this decentralized economy and ecosystem. And we've got things like decentralized exchanges on the way, but for right now, and for the next little while, there's still an entire generation of people that are very used to the way things have been done forever. And so, they're going to want to use services like these. But it's just another lesson for everybody to learn that, you don't want to leave large amounts of money on any sort of exchange. If you're day trading, you're kind of stuck for the moment doing that. But you have to be careful. With centralization comes even more risk than you would have if you were just storing it and securing it yourself. So lesson learned, hopefully for some of these people. It was probably a little bit painful, but that's the way these things go. And these lessons are going to have to keep being learned until it's just common knowledge.
Personal responsibility, people. Get yourself a Trezor. Don't play these exchange games. You never know when the police are going to raid some exchange in Korea, try to shut it down. Who knows what's going on?
I did want to say, sorry for bumping in here, but last time I talked to Trace, we were talking about storage, and he had mentioned myself, I do use hardware wallets because that's kind of where my technical abilities lie. But Trace is he's not much on the side of hardware wallets. He talks about the Glacier protocols, which I'm very interested in learning about. So another option out there for the more technical out there, very, very secure from what I understand. And I'd love to chat about that sometime.
Trace, take it away. Any comments on what Lorien and what Benny had to say? Unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I'm being censored. I'm being censored. I did it to myself.
Censoring yourself. Come on now.
But no, Benny raises like well, his big point here is about risk. And he hits on several different areas where people just do not appreciate the risk that they're taking on. For example, we talked in Denver during the panel, I talked about the Dole Foods case. I mean, this is absolutely insane. The amount of risk that people are taking with their 401ks, with their IRAs, with their E-Trade accounts, with their interactive brokerage accounts. And now the Federal Reserve is starting to raise interest rates, and the European Central Bank is thinking about stopping its quantitative easing. Do you have any idea what that could possibly do to implode balance sheets across the world? Because you start getting bad debt. And then you start having counterparty risk, and you start having more bank failures. And the European Central Bank, I just tweeted out that they're talking about we need to have clearer guidelines for when we actually allow people to withdraw cash from their accounts, you know, and not physical cash, like, you know, altcoin Euro cash. I mean, it is absolutely crazy. So like the Dole Foods case, we had 36 million shares authorized, and in the court case, it came out that there are 48 million shares that were facially valid on people's brokerage statements. I mean, selling the same thing twice. And this is common practice and just the way it's done because of how archaic the plumbing is in that system. And so you think you own shares, but you don't really own shares. Prove it. And then we get to something like Bitcoin. And, you know, Benny talks about using a hardware wallet. And I think most people don't even understand what they mean when they say hardware wallet. Usually, I think what they mean is they're using a dedicated device, something like a Trezor or a Ledger, and they're using that to hold their keys in an offline way. Now, in my personal case, I think that the safest way to hold your keys is to run a full Bitcoin node, run Armory on a computer that never touches the internet, something like a Purism laptop specifically. If you really want to get crazy, disable all the networking components possible and don't even have a Wi-Fi card in it, which you can get with a Purism laptop. And then for operational security, implement stuff like the Glacier Protocol, glacierprotocol.org. And in this case, the Purism laptop would be functioning as your hardware wallet. The difference between the Purism laptop and a Ledger wallet or a Trezor, for example, is that you're running like with a Trezor or a Ledger, you're running a device that is specifically made to run Bitcoin. In some ways, you're trusting that company a lot. You're trusting them not to put a backdoor in their code. You're trusting them a lot not to put a backdoor in their hardware. You're trusting that what's actually running on that USB device is actually what was intended. There were some people, they bought Ledger or Trezor wallets off of Amazon, and they get it in the mail and it already has the seed filled out.
Well, yeah, but that third party, that's making a big mistake buying it from Amazon. But
But if you're a noob, if you're new at this, you don't have any. That's just, you have no idea. You don't know what you don't know, right? And so knowledge is powerful and it's key in this area. And so that's one of the reasons I like Armory and Bitcoin Core. One, you can verify the PGP key of both of them. Two, you can run it on a computer that never touches the internet ever. The software that's generating and securing the private keys. I mean, that's powerful. And even more important is you get a lot of benefits in terms of security through obfuscation. Not that this is necessarily what you should rely on, but when you get that Purism laptop and it doesn't have a Wi-Fi card in it and it never touches the internet, well, Purism doesn't have any idea what you're going to use that for. They don't have any idea whether you're going to use that to secure nuclear codes or whether you're going to secure that you're going to be securing Bitcoin keys with it, right? And so and then you can go download the Armory software, Bitcoin Core, from wherever you want. And you could actually have two Purism laptops, one that talks to the internet and one that is solely cold and offline. And then the one that you're talking on the internet with, you only do that to talk to your Bitcoin node. And if you really want to be super ultra secure about this, you don't even talk to the internet the usual way. You get a Blockstream satellite and you hook that up to your Purism laptop. And now you've got a completely cold storage laptop that is updated with the Bitcoin blockchain. And you're doing all of the validation yourself, right? This is powerful, powerful stuff. We've now got infrastructure for Bitcoin that is totally separate from traditional internet infrastructure. That means that you're able to download the Bitcoin blockchain without going through an ISP. So how's the NSA going to know that you're actually using Bitcoin, right? Because you're not going through an ISP. You're downloading it through a satellite. I mean, these are the types of things that you got to keep in mind because, yeah, guess what? As we're seeing with all of this circus around the Trump-Russia investigation, they are weaponizing the DOJ and the FBI against political opponents. And the Obama administration already engaged in weaponizing the monetary system by things like Operation Choke Point and the banking blockade against WikiLeaks. So if you think that they're not going to weaponize this to steal people's private keys if they can, you got another thing coming, because how else are they going to get the money, right? And so you have to be super ultra paranoid when it comes to one, just the current financial system, because like the Dole Foods case and the Procter & Gamble case show, they just make stuff up in terms of who owns what, and they don't have any idea who actually owns what they own. But two, the current financial system's also completely imploding, and that we're going to see interest rates rise and counterparty risk flare its head and quantitative easing come to an end. So that's all going to be, we got a whole nother round of very interesting stuff coming down the pipeline. And people they aren't taking into account the amount of risk that's out there. And so Benny hits on several key points with that point of risk. And, in my case, I want to have the least amount of risk possible and then move out from there. I want to find what is the asset with the lowest risk profile? What is the risk-free asset? Oh, you think it's this altcoin called the Federal Reserve Dollar that can just be printed out of thin air, that we have no idea how many there are, and its emission schedule is determined behind closed doors, and the source code isn't open source, and you can't hold your own private keys? Like, that's your risk-free asset? That altcoin? You got to be kidding me. That's an altcoin scam if I ever heard of one. And so, we have to reassess the landscape given the new technology and then begin making capital allocation decisions from there. And a beautiful thing about this is the market's going to do it regardless. And so the people who are correct will have economic gains, and the people who are incorrect will have economic losses. And you can look at somebody like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. They are getting obliterated in terms of their financial performance compared to holders of Bitcoin. I mean, in my case, in 7 years, I've had a return 7x Warren Buffett's return in his entire career of 53 years. His financial performance is abysmal given the latest technology and the latest opportunities that are out there. So, I mean, I don't know why people listen or pay attention to him. His scoreboard sucks, to be honest.
Well, people are stuck in a certain paradigm, and they need, he was the master, so they still follow the master. People are stuck in the old ways. They'll learn the hard way. Well, the 20% will move on, and the 80% will be stuck behind. I don't know. You brought up some great reality check moments here, and I want to give a really quick summary here to everyone, because he said so much was just said. Everyone should replay that. They should pound that like button, because you're going to learn. You're learning a lot here today. But here's the reality check that people have to understand. A simplification. The old way, the Dole Food case. They don't even know how many stocks are out there. we don't even know how many dollars are out there. Now you can deal with that kind of thing. That's traditional stuff. Traditional stuff now is not knowing how much of that asset is really out there. Or you can get into cryptocurrency where you know how much is there. I don't see why anyone would want to stick with something where you don't even know how much of it exists. I don't, when you now have an option to be in a new financial realm where you know exactly how much of what you're buying exists. Lorien, what do you think about all of this that has just been said? I don't want to leave you out of the discussion.
Well, I think, Trace, what you were saying about the Purism laptops and all the technical expertise that's required to keep your keys, even though it is nice that you can do that, you can not have to depend on anybody. It also just shows you how far away we are from real global mass adoption, because the vast majority of people on this planet will never be able to do that, even if it is using blockstream satellites or even just the simple Trezor. So there's going to need to be still so much development in terms of how people keep those keys. So I hope that as well as the scaling and all that is being worked on. I know that some protocols are working on creating keys that can be split, and also that exchanges don't keep those keys. So I know that it's possible now, and I'm in the lion's den right now. I'm a fan of Bitcoin Cash, and I know that the work that they've been doing is to work on splitting keys so exchanges don't have to hold that information, and then if they are hacked, then these sorts of things happen. But also, it's probably going to be in the future a spectrum where the vast majority of people do have to trust or depend on some third party to maintain those keys. And that's not necessarily such a bad thing. I think that a lot of the cypherpunk mentality is that, we want to be completely secure, not from the hackers, but from government. I think the fear is always that it's going to be government at the end of the day that wants to come and nail you and steal your money and have some control over you. But I don't think that's really the case. I think one day these cryptocurrencies will become regulated, or not the protocols, but the businesses that offer services around them. And the technology will exist where people can store keys with a trusted intermediary, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean that we're going to be losing security or sovereignty or something like that. So it's great that we have these tools like Ledger and Trezor, and the Glacier protocol sounds amazing, but it just shows you again we're really, really very far from mass adoption, and I look forward to a future where that is a lot simpler for especially the people. I live in Africa. I'm creating products for Africans, and I just know that they don't care so much about being independent. They would rather care for cheap, accessible, easy ways of using cryptocurrency.
Well, first of all, Trezor is, what Trace was saying was some pretty high level paranoid technology there, that you're right, that it's first world worry, I guess. Everyone should be as paranoid as possible, but you can only be so technologically advanced. You can only have so much money. Trezor is a good answer, but it's expensive. I do know Rodolfo Novak is trying to make like a cheaper type Trezor thing, or actually has a cheaper type Trezor thing. So I think eventually there will be storage devices for the common man that are just as good as everything that we're talking about. And yet I think we're still very early on in all this. And I think it's a positive that we can point to that, hey, we are still early on. We still need, it's still so technologically, it can scare some people away, the technology. But we're going to get away from that. We're going to have our Netscape moment eventually. Benny or Trace, do you want to respond to what Lorien said?
Yeah, I mean, first, Bitcoin Core software is free. I funded Armory, which had fragmented backups like 5 years ago. So you can do Shamir secret sharing. You can split keys up any which way you want. So you've got multi-signature, you've got fragmented backups, and you can run it on a Raspberry Pi, which is like super cheap, or you could run it on a $100 laptop. And with a $100 Blockstream, you're talking $200 to validate the entire blockchain and to have multi-signature and stuff anywhere in the world. because the satellite's free. Now, the other thing that he hit on, which I think is an absolute lie, is anytime you seed in any way, either validation of the blockchain or custody of the private keys, you're ceding your monetary sovereignty. That's this idea that you can seed different pieces and yet retain your monetary sovereignty, that is a complete lie. And it's intended to attack the foundations, the philosophical foundation of cryptocurrency. And there are a lot of examples throughout the history of this industry where people who have relied on third parties in any way have been completely obliterated. Mt. Gox, like, do we need to go on, right? And so, you know, this idea that you can somehow dance between ceding custody of the keys and retaining monetary sovereignty, that's just a bunch of hogwash. And you've got to be extremely skeptical of anybody who tries to tell you that. And anybody that it tries to make it more costly to validate the blockchain, they're also attacking your monetary sovereignty. So when you try to raise the block size, when you try to lower the 10-minute time frame, those are security parameters that ensure monetary sovereignty. And so whenever you try to attack those or make those less restrictive, they're attacking monetary sovereignty. And the Monero network is a great example of the problems that come from people who just roll over like some beaten dog and accept their monetary sovereignty being stolen from them and not asserting it. What has happened with Monero lately? Well, Bitmain wanted to create ASICs for the Monero network, and the Monero developers issued a proof of work change. And so what did Bitmain do? They did 5 forks on Monero, and then they did a 21-block reorg attack on Monero. I mean, we haven't really seen significant reorg attacks done yet in this industry. But if you're doing your own validation, that's a huge, huge deal and can help protect you against reorg attacks. And so, you know, look, I understand monetary sovereignty is not for everybody. Some people just want to be slaves and just want to roll over and cede their money and cede their power to other people. And you know what? That's your choice. You want to be a slave, that's now your choice, because the tools are here. They're extremely cheap. They're available globally. And so anybody who wants to be a slave, you can choose to be a slave. But don't think that you're free. And definitely don't try to misinform or lie to other people and give them a false sense of security that they've claimed monetary sovereignty when they haven't.
Lorien's got to have a response to this one, definitely. I'm sure. Lorien, please take it away.
No, I agree with you, Trace. I think that there will be people like yourself who really rely very much on them, want to rely on themselves. And that's absolutely fine. And it's great that there are tools that allow us to do that. But again, I mean, you feel emotional about people who are willing to relinquish that sovereignty, and I understand how you feel about it, and that you wouldn't prefer that. But again, you know, a lot of people aren't like you. You know, they don't think about these things. They just think of money really as a tool, and if they can use it, and if they can spend it, and if they can send it, and we have a regulated environment where they have rights. I think that they will use it. Like I said, I live in a country and on a continent where people, you know, they don't think so much about having money that cannot be confiscated or anything like that. They want to send money home to their families. They want to be able to make cheap and fast, reliable digital payments, and that's kind of what drives them. Obviously, we have a much greater perspective on these things, and we understand how monetary history has gone, and we don't appreciate how central banks centrally plan everything, and how governments can shut down companies like WikiLeaks in terms of accepting payments. So, of course, there's going to be a spectrum. I mean, we sit on the one side, and there's going to be a number of people who sit on the other side, and you call them slaves, and they don't think of themselves as slaves. They just think of themselves as operating in an environment and using tools. I guess that's kind of the world. You know, there's a lot of different people around.
Yeah.
Benny, sorry.
Well, here's another problem in your in the philosophical foundation of what you just asserted. I don't feel strongly about whether somebody chooses to be a slave or not. I feel strongly about when people make assertions that aren't grounded in the reality. When somebody, for example, tells somebody that they have monetary sovereignty when they don't, when they're lying to them, when they're committing fraud, that's where I start getting emotional. And it comes out of a form of zeal or a form of protection of the person that's being misinformed or lied to.
Fair enough. That's true.
That's where my passion comes from. If somebody wants to choose to be a slave, like, go for it. But I want you to freely choose it. I want you to know that there are options and know what you're really doing and know what you're really buying. That's another thing. Like, this Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. Like, why would we want any type of obfuscation or any type of infringement on people's ability to freely choose what they're actually buying? Well, I want people to know exactly what they're buying. And if your protocol is so strong and if your protocol is so amazing and so great, why would you want to have it be confusingly similar or otherwise be confused with Bitcoin? I mean, it just shows a severe amount of weakness. So I don't understand why you call it Bitcoin Cash, why you don't just call it Bcash to remove that ambiguity and that doubt so that you're not confusing people.
Sure, no, and we do have that problem. Even today, we had a discussion about selling because we have voucher products, and it's tough when you have something like Bitcoin Cash because a lot of people don't understand the difference between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core. So it is complicated, and I understand that I don't engage in those arguments about what's the real Bitcoin and so on. And I think the way I think about it is that we have a lot of Linux distros. We've got Red Hat and we've got Ubuntu and that sort of thing. And to me, when I think about Bitcoin, we've got now different versions of Bitcoin. We've got Bitcoin Cash, we've got Bitcoin Gold, we've got all these different Bitcoins. And so I think that it's all right. People are okay with calling it Bitcoin Gold because it's a version of Bitcoin that has certain characteristics, and same with Bitcoin Cash. So you won't hear me arguing about Bitcoin, and that core is not the true Bitcoin and so on. I would rather us look at the merits of the blockchains themselves, see which ones serve the purposes that they do, and let people choose. Now, we both recognize that Bitcoin and BTC and BCH are different. They have different use cases. One is for cash and one is for investing, I guess, and making sure that you've got an investment that cannot be confiscated. And so I'm quite happy for both of those to exist. And if it turns out that we don't need both and we only need one or none or all, then that's a world I'm quite happy to live in. So again, your emotion about what you feel that people on the Bitcoin Cash side are doing, I recognize and accept, but that's, I guess, not this argument right now. It's about people, what needs they have and what do they want out of all this. Do you want to buy a cup of coffee or do you want to invest for the long term?
Benny's raising his hand there. Take it away and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I've got a few thoughts here. There's a lot of stuff that was in there. I'll try and condense my thoughts a little bit here. I mean, from both parties, everything that was hit on centered around choice. And I think one of the major issues here is there's a lot of talk of who needs what and who needs something to function a certain way, and the priority of which needs are put first. So, Bitcoin was born out of this resistance to centralized power and this abuse of power in the system, and you can see that in the way it was created. And so I think Trace's emotion is coming from the idea that should come secondary, and I agree with Trace in that I think that should be #1 priority, because with power comes corruption, and I think we need to get as far away from that as possible. And I'm willing to wait for things like Lightning Network to allow for myself to get a cup of coffee. if it means that I get my financial sovereignty first. Lorien seems to be leaning towards the side of we need quick, cheap, easy blockchain payments now for coffee or for smaller items. And I mean, if people want to use that, that's fine. One of the issues that I really have in this whole debacle that's been happening since August is that confusion of misleading people around names and stuff like that. I'm working right now, and in the office from time to time we get people coming in that don't understand the difference and that have maybe bought one and don't realize that they did it wrong, or they sent a payment to somebody who's accepting Bitcoin Cash and now they don't know what to do and how to get it back. And so, you know, the issue comes there. But for myself, the reason I got involved in this is to step away from these centralized institutions and kind of be involved in creating that doorway to getting people into the open and kind of free ecosystem that is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And so, yeah, when I hear things like, yeah, people aren't they don't really care if they're being governed, or they don't really care. They don't until it affects them. They don't until they go to try to do something and they're not allowed for some reason. And that doesn't necessarily come right away. Sure, if you go to use Bitcoin Cash right now, nobody's going to tell you no until they do, right? So it's never right away. It's that everything is trying to lean towards centralization over time. And so in my head, I want to fight that tooth and nail as much as possible, as early on as possible, so that we don't end up with just a bunch of banks that host cryptocurrency. Because that's not the future I want. I want sovereign individuals deciding what to do with their money. And the beauty about this, though, is that Bitcoin itself, it's not going anywhere. And there's going to be these options out there. And so as soon as centralization starts happening in some of these systems, people will start asking, well, why can't I do that with this currency in particular? Why can't I do that here? Why can't I do that when I'm using my cryptocurrency bank when I decided to send it here or here and I just wasn't allowed? What's the difference? And then they realize, oh, well, I'll go with the free and open system. So I think the choice is great. And the best part about now with the dawn of cryptocurrency is now we get to directly compare these systems in real time, and time will tell what's better.
There you go. There you go. Let the free market decide. Let's do it. Trace, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've had a wonderful discussion today. You know, it's been wide ranging, everywhere from the fraud of the current monetary system to the fraud of Bitcoin Cash, not using a name like Bcash. It's not confusingly similar or intentionally misleading. We've had a great discussion about monetary sovereignty, about the importance that people need to take in their own choices and in their own decisions when it comes to that, and not just rolling over and ceding it away. And, you know, Benny makes great points. It doesn't matter until it's the only thing that matters, right? It doesn't matter until your $10 million disappears. I mean, I have a friend that they were using blockchain.info, and I told them to use Armory. And couple years later, I get a ping on Skype, oh, all my Bitcoins are gone. Well, those Bitcoins would be $10 million today. You know, what could have been for them, right? I mean, I have another friend. He had what would be about $5-6 million today in Mt. Gox. He got laid off over a year ago. He's been on unemployment. He's in deep depression because of that. You know, what could have been? He could have been a multi-millionaire. Instead, he's like living on his parents' couch, literally. So like when you don't have monetary sovereignty, it really impinges a lot of your choices across a wide variety of space in your life. And so, hey, you know, that I want people to have monetary sovereignty, but if they don't, you know, that's their choice now, because we have the tools and we've rolled the tools out and they're free and they're open source. And we don't, you know, we take part in this in a very open and transparent way, and we don't try to mislead people or engage in fraud or different names or things like this. Like, we want people to know exactly what they're doing, and that's always been part of the Bitcoin ethos. And so it's been very interesting watching these other communities pop up where they value different things. They don't value honesty and transparency and clarity and specificity and accuracy, you know? So, hey, if they don't value those things, then how can you really trust them? How can you trust anything that they say? You know, so, you know, these are, I mean, that's the whole point of engaging in discussion, is you build it on a premise that you can trust what the other person is asserting or what they're saying. But when you're dealing with people that just engage in lies and fraud and are intentionally trying to mislead or confuse you or others, you know, that, like, why even engage? Right. So, you know, we're moving into an era where everybody has to take personal responsibility. They have to take control over their own choices. And if you're going to trust third parties, you're going to get completely screwed. Like, it's just a matter of time. And so, hey, don't trust, verify. And that's a cypherpunk philosophy and foundation that we've built our entire community on.
Personal responsibility is the new counterculture, people. Pound that like button. Lorien, tell us what is up, because we're reaching the conclusion of the show here, obviously. If you have anything to say with what Trace just said, but tell us what's going up with your Centbee wallet, with Africa, with the school thing we were talking about before the show. Everyone's very curious about South Africa, and to have a guest from South Africa who's there on the ground is awesome. So take it away, Lorien.
Well, and as you know, Adam, there's a lot of cash problems here in Africa. You were in Zim, we were there together, and we were in Mozambique. And, you know, people are becoming very aware of cryptocurrency. Even if you look at Google Trends now, Bitcoin is the #1 in South Africa, the search for term. So it's an exciting place to be if you're building these things. They have very, clear problems that they want to solve. And so, you know, we were building Centbee on Bitcoin, and it always became down to just practicalities. You know, what can we give our customers? They want to use digital cash. In fact, just read an article yesterday from the finance minister of Zimbabwe. You know, 96% of the transactions are digital through mobile money. So people are very used to using mobile payments. You know, you've seen those dollars. You know, they're all raggedy and falling apart. So the government is really trying very hard to move into a cashless society, and of course that frightens a lot of us who like freedom. But now that we have these cryptos, it works so much better. So Centbee was always about, okay, well, you know, what's missing? We've got a protocol that's been developed. We've got Trezor and stuff like that that's good for storage. But we need people to use it. So we've been focusing very heavily on actually making it useful. And so if people want to buy groceries, if they want to pay their rent, if they want to buy energy, if they want to buy electricity, then we're creating all those sorts of products. Also, we're creating voucher products. So a big barrier to entry into crypto right now is the online exchanges. Most people just don't have the technical competency or the access to be able to use an online exchange. Also in Zim and Mozambique and these countries that don't even have online exchanges, well, Zimbabwe's got one, Tawanda. So that's a barrier to entry, and we think that actually allowing people to buy crypto using vouchers at stores is going to be how the next billion people get into crypto. So we've been doing that. Now as I said, we started with Bitcoin, but the fees and so on. So we've been thinking practically, and that's why when it comes down to practicalities, we felt like without trying to defraud anybody or anything, we really think that Bitcoin Cash it works. It's quick, it's easy to access, it's liquid, and so all we want to do is we want to get people out of Zimbabwe dollars, out of bank during currencies, out of central bank currencies, into crypto. And Bitcoin Cash has certainly been a very easy first entry. And Trace, we're not trying to defraud anybody. We understand that there's a lot of emotion in the space. We accept that. Unfortunately, we're not trying to debate, which is the real Bitcoin. And, you know, I don't want to argue with, I don't want to fight. You know, I like what you've done, especially. I mean, you've done a great amount of work in the space. But we're here on the ground. We're in Africa. It's a different world compared to the States or Europe. And we're just trying to go with what works. And I think that we're achieving a lot down here and really breaking the ground in terms of giving people access to crypto, even if it is their first port of call. And then maybe from them having access to Bitcoin Cash, if they want to, they can choose to now go and trade it or whatever they like for other cryptocurrencies. So Africa is fantastic. You know, if you are trying to build a crypto business, if you want to spread cryptocurrency, this is where you want to be. And we hope that ultimately all this sort of animosity within the crypto community can eventually go away, and we can get back to how it was all those years ago when we all were brothers and sisters, and we were all just trying to fight the man instead of each other. So that's kind of the perspective that I can give you from here.
Well, thank you, Lorien. And I think Benny and Trace should visit Africa soon. All of you should, actually. I think it'd be great. We should do a show from Africa. I had a blast there. I love hanging with Lorien there. Benny, what are some conclusionary thoughts on your part and anything that we left off? Anything you want to say in response to what Lorien just said?
I don't know. I think everything that needs to be said has been pretty much covered here. Again, like when it comes to the topics at hand, I mean the exchange getting hacked there, I just see it as another non-event, but another good example of how your risk goes through the roof when you trust a centralized entity to hold your money or your private keys. As far as we didn't really, I don't know if you touched on it when I kind of went offline for a minute there, but like the Mt. Gox coins being moved around the other day. Again, I'm not super worried about that. I know it kind of sucks for the price in the short term, but all of those coins are being spread around to other people that want to buy them right now at this price, and they're going to hold on to them. And that's great. I'm very happy for anybody who picked any up from that market sell that Johnny Slippery Fingers there did on the exchange. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just happy to be in the space, and I'm excited that I just get to be part of all of this playing out, because it's beyond interesting to see how this space has changed, even just in the past year. But like, I haven't been around as long as some people, but the past 4 years have been some of the most interesting of my life. And I can't wait to see what the next 4 brings. But yeah, Adam, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure. I remember again, this time of the year last year, there was FUD abounding, even though price was going up. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have many more of these to come.
There's always going to be FUD. There's always going to be some news out of Asia or some exchange or, well, here's real news. Australia to ban cash payments over $10,000. That's good news for Bitcoin people. That Australian people, get a hold of some Bitcoin. Trace, I'm going to let you conclude everything here. What do you have to say? Any final thoughts?
Well, thanks so much for having us on here. We had a very wide-ranging discussion. Even if it gets a little fun with Lorien, I'm sure he can prove his good intentions by making absolute clarity on any products or services where he's selling, and perhaps renaming everything Bcash so that it's absolutely clear exactly what it is, and there isn't any intent to mislead or defraud people about what they're buying, any confusingly similar stuff. But this just gets at the heart of why are we doing all of this stuff? And at least for me, I'm not selling anybody anything. I mean, some of my companies that I'm invested in, like Kraken, for example, I mean, we trade Bitcoin, we trade Bcash, we trade like all the other coins. So, anywhere where I like, anytime we're able to take any territory in terms of monetary sovereignty, I think that's a good thing. And, you know, Bcash is helping people do that in some ways. So, you know, there is an aspect of everybody being in it together who's in the crypto industry. I don't know that it will always stay that way, because some of these networks are more susceptible to censorship than others. And particularly with the new fork that's going to be coming out with Bcash, going from 8 megabytes to 32 megabytes, and perhaps even decreasing the block time from 10 minutes to 2.5 minutes, you know, that could really make it much more susceptible to censorship and to control by governmental entities, or at least pressure being exerted on actors in it. So, you know, you always got to keep that kind of stuff in mind. And but otherwise, you know, it's just wonderful. We've got so many different tools. We've got so many different choices. And when we have more choices, we're generally wealthier, because we can make some, you know, we can choose different ways to accomplish the means, or accomplish the things that we want to get done. And, you know, for some people that's protecting their assets, for other people that's buying coffees or whatever, you know, so let's let the, you know, I love that we have all this financial innovation happening, and it's great. Yeah, and I'm just very grateful that you're taking the time to do your show and talk about all of these things and help educate the new people too.
Well, thank you, Trace. Thank you, all my guests, for being on this wild and wacky show. This Week in Bitcoin, we do this every Friday. You never know what's going to happen, who's going to be on next. I do post a new show here on this channel every single day. Saturday is the Beyond Bitcoin show. I'll do that tomorrow, obviously. If you're in Seattle, like I am, 5 p.m. today, there's going to be a meetup. The information is linked to below. We could talk about this show. We could talk about Bitcoin. We could talk about altcoins. It's going to be fun. Everybody, I'm Adam Meister, Bitcoin Meister, Disrupt Meister. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Pound that like button. Check out the links below. Everyone have a great weekend. See you later. Thanks a lot, everyone, again for being on. Bye-bye.